Let me tell you, Joe, this has honestly been the darkest chapter I have ever had to live through. You have to understand, I have a daughter who is 22 years old, so the very idea that someone would accuse me of assaulting or harming a woman is insane to me. I am telling you right now, I am not that kind of man. I would never lay a hand on anybody. But what actually happens when a legacy built on decades of raw talent and grinding hustle gets slammed by a relentless public scandal and a nightmare legal war? Clifton Powell, a guy whose face you have seen in some of the biggest blockbusters in history, has been completely shaken by allegations that threaten to destroy every single thing he fought to build. Now, the word on the street is that the final sentence has been handed down. But we have to ask, is this really the conclusion of the saga, or is it just the opening scene of a cover-up that Hollywood is desperate to keep buried? From the unforgiving concrete of southeast Washington, D.C. to the bright lights of the silver screen, Powell's life has been a roller coaster of massive wins, crushing losses, and a constant battle against powers that seem way out of his hands. The aftermath of the verdict. When the news broke regarding Clifton Powell's final sentencing, it didn't just make a splash. It sent a massive earthquake rippling through Tinseltown and the entire entertainment world. It has left die-hard fans and industry power players scratching their heads, wondering if this is the end of the road for one of the most distinct character actors of the last 30 years. You might not know his name right off the bat, but trust me, you know the face. He is etched into the DNA of iconic movies that defined both the urban genre and mainstream cinema. But looking at it now, this final judgment feels like a heavy curtain call that is casting a giant shadow over his entire resume. However, the hush-hush nature of the verdict and the silence from his camp are raising some serious red flags. Is this truly the end of his career, or is it a major pivot point that is obscuring a much messier truth underneath? We are talking about a hustle that spans over 3 decades, defined by his ability to play any role and a serious dedication to the art of acting. To watch all of that potentially crumble under the pressure of this sentence is a brutal wake-up call about how quickly a reputation can be shattered. The fact that the details remain so vague in the press only throws more gas on the speculation fire. Has the industry just cancelled one of its most reliable veterans? Or is there something lurking beneath the surface that the general public hasn't been clued in on yet? The uncertainty is going through the roof as rumours and half-baked theories spin around this announcement, creating a massive gap between the villain he often plays and the real man trapped in this controversy. Show business is built entirely on perception, and we all know that a single bad headline has the power to erase years of box office success. Powell's situation is a grim cautionary tale about the terrifying power of the court of public opinion, which often hits harder and lasts longer than any actual legal ruling. The term final sentence sounds way less like closure and more like a permanent label slapped on him by a society that loves to judge first and ask questions later. As we look at the landscape in 2026, this moment reveals a harsh reality about Powell's legacy and the ruthless machinery that controls who survives in Hollywood. This whole mess forces us to look at the collision between 2 opposing forces, a person's right to privacy and fairness versus the public demand for accountability. It also highlights industry rules that are totally dependent on maintaining a clean image and avoiding scandal at all costs. The weight of this ruling goes way beyond just losing a few acting gigs. It strikes at the core of his personal life and challenges his very identity as a man. It is a perfect example of how the highest highs and the lowest lows can exist side by side in the most extreme way possible. The consequences here are grave because it proves that fame is a double-edged sword. It can lead to a total destruction of character that public figures are often powerless to stop. Actors who pour their souls into their roles with total honesty usually make it look easy, like they have no struggles. They are masters at hiding the internal conflict, making us believe they are invincible. But Powell's life exposes the massive canyon between his public trophies and his private battles, a level of stress that very few people could actually handle without breaking. This is more than just a period at the end of a sentence. It challenges us to rethink how Hollywood treats its stars when the tide turns against them, a cycle we see repeating constantly in this business. It seems like the system is designed to take a man's life work and shrink it down to nothing, often based on accusations that float around without solid receipts to back them up. The full picture of who Powell really is will only come into focus when we peel back the layers of his personal history and his professional grind. So buckle up, because we are about to take a deep dive journey through the life and impact of Clifton Powell, a man whose terrifying presence on screen was just the tip of the iceberg in a much larger, more complicated saga. The climb from the bottom. Clifton Powell's narrative starts a million miles away from the glitz of Hollywood, forged in the rough streets of southeast Washington, D.C., a neighborhood where you had to be tough just to survive the walk to school. Growing up surrounded by poverty, loss and chaos, Powell dealt with hurdles early on that required a serious amount of grit and backbone. He lost his mother when he was only 4 years old, and with a father fighting his own demons with alcoholism, the family unit was fractured, to say the least. But here is the kicker. Instead of letting these early traumas define him, Powell sought out mentors and a support network. These people helped steer him away from the street life that swallowed up so many of his peers. That foundation of pure survival instinct laid the groundwork for his future career in front of the camera. Powell's rise through the Hollywood ranks was powered by a blue-collar work ethic and a deep well of real-world pain and experience. His breakout moment came in 1993 with the gritty urban classic Menace to Society, where he showcased a raw energy and authenticity that made both critics and audiences sit up and take notice. It was this pivotal breakout role that ultimately kicked the door open, introducing him to a massive mainstream audience that had previously been sleeping on his talent. But beyond just exposure, the project served as undeniable proof that he possessed the raw grit and emotional intelligence required to bring complicated, deeply troubled characters to life on the big screen. Not long after that breakthrough, Powell cemented his status as a pop culture icon by joining the legendary Friday franchise, where his impeccable comedic timing and electric charisma instantly turned him into an absolute fan favourite. He showcased a level of versatility that is incredibly rare in Hollywood, effortlessly flipping the switch between heart-wrenching, intense dramas and laugh-out-loud slapstick comedies. What truly set him apart from his peers was this chameleon-like ability to inhabit any soul, transforming from a terrifying, bone-chilling villain to a hilarious comic relief character without missing a beat. It became immediately obvious to everyone in the industry that Powell was never going to settle for being put in a box or limited by typical casting stereotypes. Instead, he fully embraced the entire spectrum of storytelling, attacking every single script with a level of skill and subtle nuance that commanded respect. By the time 2004 rolled around, Powell had firmly established himself as one of the most reliable character actors in the game, delivering a powerhouse performance in the critically worshipped biopic Ray. Starring opposite the incredible Jamie Foxx, Powell took on the role of Jeff Brown Ray, Charles's steadfast road manager, injecting the film with a heavy dose of emotional loyalty and grounded realism. That portrayal was so moving that it earned him a well-deserved nomination for an NAA CP Image Award, a nod that many critics felt was long overdue. This wasn't just a trophy nomination. It was a prestigious stamp of approval that solidified his standing among the elite inner circles of the entertainment business. Even though his name wasn't always at the very top of the call sheet, Powell's mere presence added weight to every production, earning him deep admiration from producers and insiders alike. Throughout his hustle, Powell racked up credits in some of the most culturally defining movies of the era, ranging from the gritty streets of Dead Presidents to the global smash Rush Hour and the beloved sequel Next Friday. When you look at his resume boasting more than 100 credits across both the silver screen and television, the sheer volume of his work is staggering. It stands as a testament to his longevity in a fickle industry, proving that he managed to stay relevant and in high demand for decades while others faded away. Casting directors and filmmakers kept him on speed dial because they knew he delivered authenticity every single time, creating unforgettable scene-stealing moments regardless of screen time. He possessed that rare magic, allowing him to morph from a dangerous street heavy into a warm, loving father figure, a dynamic range that very few performers could ever hope to replicate. However, Powell's journey wasn't just a walk down the red carpet. He faced significant hardships and turbulence throughout his personal and professional life. While he tasted the sweetness of success, he also had to navigate the bitter challenges of systemic barriers and private demons that the public cameras rarely captured. His rise to fame was built on the back of relentless grinding against what often felt like insurmountable odds battles, fought both behind the velvet ropes and on the sound stages. He clawed his way to recognition through sheer force of will, maintaining that drive his entire life simply because he refused to let his circumstances dictate his destiny. The man faced roadblock after roadblock throughout his career hurdles that would have made a lesser artist quit the business entirely. Yet he remained the ultimate professional, a dedicated craftsman who let his undeniable talent and persistent work ethic do all the talking. His biography serves as a stark reminder that in Tinseltown you need way more than just raw talent to survive. You need the street smarts to navigate the unexpected curveballs life throws at you. Powell built his empire through a methodical brick-by-brick approach, combining an insane level of dedication with an uncanny ability to adapt to the changing tides of Hollywood. But just as he reached the pinnacle of respect, the narrative of his life took a sharp, darker turn as serious legal issues began to surface, threatening to destroy everything he had built. Let's take a closer look at the pivotal highlights that defined his trajectory. Clifton Powell's filmography is studded with iconic performances that have seared themselves into our memories, securing his legacy as one of the most versatile heavy hitters in the game. While his initial gigs laid the groundwork, showing flashes of brilliance in smaller parts, it was his fearless willingness to tackle the most challenging and diverse roles available that truly earned him the reverence of his peers and fans. In cult classics like Menace to Society, he didn't just act, he captured the terrifying, unfiltered grit of urban survival with an intensity that was genuinely scary to watch. That specific role became a defining lightning bolt in his career, introducing the world to an actor who could command a scene with nothing more than a look and a deep, booming voice. At the exact same time, Powell was carving out a legendary lane in comedy, specifically within the Friday universe, where his sharp wit and over-the-top energy created moments we still quote today. These blockbuster hits didn't just pay the bills, they gave him access to a massive diverse audience that crossed all cultural lines. They showcased a completely different side of his artistry, proving he could blend hilarious comedic timing with a relatability that made him feel like someone you actually knew. His performances brought a necessary balance and depth to these scripts, engaging viewers in a way that elevated him far beyond the typical sidekick status. Then came the drama of 2004's Ray. Stepping into the shoes of Jeff Brown, the loyal right-hand man to the legendary Ray Charles Powell revealed a softer capability to infuse genuine sensitivity and nuance into a supporting role. The NAACP Image Award nomination he received for that work wasn't just another shiny object for the shelf. It was a massive validation of his craft, proving he could stand toe-to-toe with the best in the business during an incredibly competitive year. It recognised his vital contribution to a film that was not only a box office hit, but a celebration of African-American history and musical artistry. With over 100 film credits under his belt, including smash hits like Why Do Fools Fall in Love and Rush Hour, his body of work is nothing short of legendary. This extensive catalogue established his unique signature style, creating authentic, necessary characters that often became the driving force behind the movie's emotional narrative. Directors valued his professionalism immensely because they knew he could seamlessly transform into whatever the story needed. He had a knack for elevating the material, making every scene he touched significantly better just by being in the frame. His ability to shapeshift across genres made him the actor everyone wanted on their set, but beyond the roles, his work is defined by a rare and piercing emotional honesty. He possessed that signature glare that could freeze a room in terror, yet in the same breath, his impeccable comedic rhythm could have an entire audience doubling over in laughter. What really set him apart was his ability to strip away the artifice and showcase a raw humanity that struck a chord with viewers deep in their souls. Unlike the one-trick ponies who get pigeonholed into the same tired archetypes, Powell brought a serious emotional weight to the screen that defied predictable acting formulas. By grinding non-stop across a massive variety of projects, he built up the kind of legendary filmography that most aspiring stars spend their whole lives dreaming about. But very few ever actually reach that mountaintop, proving that his staying power and dedication to the craft were truly one in a million. Powell was a total chameleon, effortlessly flipping the script between genres and proving he had the artistic chops and professional savvy to handle anything Hollywood threw his way. And believe me, Tinseltown took notice, placing a high premium on his consistent delivery and work ethic. It wasn't just fan service. The heavy hitters and fellow thespians respected the hustle, acknowledging a career built on solid, undeniable talent. But just as he was riding high on decades of hard work, dark clouds started gathering on the horizon, threatening to wash away his legacy as a nasty legal battle loomed. Flashback to the tail end of summer in 2011 when Clifton Powell's world got flipped upside down in the Big Easy after a woman going by the name Keanti Myers pointed the finger at him regarding a hotel hookup in New Orleans. She claimed that what began as a mutual vibe quickly went south, turning into a nightmare scenario that she described as far too forceful and aggressive. Even though she insisted she told him to quit it, the story didn't stay behind closed doors. It hit the gossip rags with the force of a hurricane. Notorious sites like TMZ splashed the accusations across the web with brutal clickbait headlines that didn't care about the details or the truth. In a heartbeat, the man we all loved from Friday and Ray was being dragged through the mud, his name now inextricably linked to some very ugly suspicion and controversy. From the jump, Powell didn't take this lying down. He vehemently denied every single word of the accusations. His team immediately clapped back, declaring the story total fiction and promising to fight tooth and nail, using every legal tool available to clear his name. But we all know how this goes. Once that bell is rung in the public square, the fallout spreads way further than any courtroom walls. Even after the cops dropped the criminal investigation because the evidence just wasn't there, those damaging headlines continued to haunt him. The drama dragged on because Myers wasn't done. She slapped him with a civil lawsuit chasing a check for over $75,000 and keeping this headache alive for years. Now, civil court is a whole different beast compared to criminal court. You don't need beyond a reasonable doubt. You just need a preponderance of evidence. Basically, that means the jury only has to think it's 51% likely that the story is true to make you pay up. That lower bar creates a minefield for celebrities where the odds are often stacked against them. Out here in the real world, and especially in the ruthless ecosystem of Hollywood, an unproven accusation is practically a conviction, capable of torching reputations where perception beats facts every time. Powell later opened up about how this ongoing legal nightmare slowly eroded the trust he had built in the industry. It wasn't just bad press, it was radio silence from casting directors, leaving him feeling condemned before he ever got to tell his side of the story. Hollywood drops you like a hot potato the second a scandal breaks. Gigs he had lined up evaporated into thin air, and producers became terrified to attach their names to his amid the swirling rumours. He watched guaranteed television spots get slashed without a word, leaving his calendar uncomfortably empty. Effectively, the industry put him in the penalty box, sidelining his career during his prime years. He even recalled a specific heartbreak where a major recurring role he booked was axed after only 2 episodes, with no explanation given other than the dark shadow of those allegations. The mental and emotional toll of living under that cloud was absolutely crushing for him. Powell admitted this was the darkest hole he'd been in since burying his father way back in the day. And as a father himself, the sting was even worse, as he was terrified about how these ugly public claims would twist his children's view of him. He stood his ground on his innocence, but he couldn't stop the whispers from reaching his family, unable to shield them from the doubt that followed them everywhere. Walking down the street became a trial of its own feeling, the side eyes from strangers and reading toxic comments from people who had already decided he was a villain. For 4 long years, he had to keep showing up and being a pro, balancing his life while this unresolved civil case hung over his head like an anvil. The wheels of justice turned painfully slow, dragging out the process to an excruciating degree. It was a slog because the attorneys and judges spent forever bickering over every little technicality and minor argument. Finally, in 2017, the curtain closed on the lawsuit because there simply wasn't any evidence to back up the claims. However, it wasn't a total win, as Powell lost his countersuits for defamation and emotional distress, meaning he couldn't punish his accuser back. While the case was technically over, the emotional scars remained fresh, and the general public didn't exactly throw a parade for his exoneration. The real tragedy here isn't a jail sentence, it's the life sentence of a tarnished name serving as a punishment that the court never ordered. Even without a single formal conviction, the court of public opinion acts as its own executioner, destroying images in an industry that runs entirely on reputation. We call it a final sentence because that stigma sticks to your skin like a tattoo. It follows a person to the grave, shadowing them even after the gavel bangs in their favour and they are legally cleared. By all legal metrics, Powell walked away clean and should have been totally vindicated, but in the unforgiving eyes of the public, the question mark often remains. The fallout was nothing short of catastrophic, ripping through his life like a tornado. He didn't just lose gigs, he watched his inner circle evaporate as friends turned their backs, leaving him to fight a losing battle against a narrative that was actively destroying decades of hard work. This painful chapter in his saga exposes the grim, often ignored underbelly of the entertainment capital, proving that in the court of public opinion, the truth is often irrelevant. Once the rumour mill starts churning, perception becomes reality, capable of burying even the most seasoned veterans under a mountain of speculation. While the headlines focused on the high-stakes legal drama playing out in the courtroom, a more insidious struggle was brewing just out of sight. Shedding light on the massive hurdles Powell was up against, it wasn't just about the law, it was about the total collapse of his professional standing and his private peace of mind. The shockwaves from these allegations didn't stop at the courthouse steps. They tore through the very fabric of his existence, threatening to dismantle everything he held dear, from his career to his family unit. As the phone stopped ringing and scripts stopped coming in, Powell was trapped in a heartbreaking paradox that few could understand. To the world, he was a recognisable star, but behind closed doors, his life was being systematically taken apart piece by piece. The same industry that had once rolled out the red carpet for his talent now treated him like he was radioactive, holding him up as a grim warning of how fast you can fall from grace. Losing his livelihood was devastating to his bank account, sure, but the emotional toll was even heavier, striking at the very core of his identity as an artist. When the scandal was at its absolute peak, his forced disappearance from movie sets and red carpets just accelerated his erasure from the Hollywood scene. Roles that would have been slam dunks in normal times were now drifting out of reach, leaving him drowning in a sea of isolation and crushing hopelessness. Show business is all about image and the bottom line, so naturally the powers that be sprinted in the opposite direction to distance themselves from the potential toxic fallout. It didn't matter if he was innocent. Studios and executives are allergic to controversy and dropped him like a hot potato, showcasing just how heartless the corporate machine can be. Looking back, Powell has described those dark days as feeling like he had been banished to a professional wasteland, completely cut off from the world he knew. He faced the humiliation of being abruptly edited out of a TV series he had already filmed, while promising movie roles mysteriously evaporated before he could even audition. These were not just speed bumps, they were roadblocks that completely derailed a career that had been on a steady upward climb for years. The instability made it impossible to plan for tomorrow, leaving him scrambling for a foothold in a youth-obsessed town that prefers its stars without any messy baggage. Powell hasn't minced words about the trauma, calling the experience one of the most agonising and soul-crushing periods he has ever had to survive. The damage went way deeper than his IMDb page. The accusations infiltrated his home, poisoning the sanctity of his family life. Every time he saw a headline or heard the chatter, anxiety gnawed at him, because his biggest fear wasn't losing a job, but that his own children, specifically his daughter, might start to doubt him and believe the lies. Even after he screamed his innocence from the rooftops, the lingering cloud of suspicion strained his family's interactions with neighbours and friends, turning their community into a hostile environment. He could feel the weight of public judgment, physically sensing the burning stares and hushed whispers of strangers whenever he dared to step outside. Then there was the internet, a cesspool where cowards hiding behind avatars and fake usernames acted as judge, jury and executioner, completely trampling over the fundamental concept of innocent until proven guilty without a shred of decency or respect. Living under a microscope created a suffocating emotional prison that drained every ounce of his energy, robbing him of any peace during an already chaotic storm. Even when the civil suit was finally tossed out, it wasn't a magic fix. The stain remained, and he was left with the Herculean task of rebuilding a reputation that had been dragged through the mud. The legal machinery ground on for so long that it stole prime years of his career time that no judge or settlement check could ever give him back. People say Hollywood has a short memory, but that is a straight-up lie. When it comes to forgiveness, because the industry holds a grudge and the stigma of controversy clings to artists like a bad smell, long after they have been vindicated by the facts. Powell was left picking up the pieces, forced to navigate a minefield of not just emotional trauma, but also the crushing financial instability that inevitably follows a scandal of this magnitude. His savings were bleeding out to cover legal fees, testing his resilience and pushing him to the absolute brink of what one man can endure. The public shaming acted like a pair of financial handcuffs, locking him in a state of stagnation where recovery seemed like a distant, impossible dream. This brutal reality check forced him to look in the mirror and confront the uncomfortable truth of how closely his self-worth was tied to his standing on the call sheet. As his career buckled under the pressure, Powell became more than just an actor out of work. He became a symbol of a much bigger, uglier conversation, sparking debates about true justice, the possibility of redemption, and whether humanity can even exist under the blinding, unforgiving glare of the Hollywood spotlight. But let's talk about the elephant in the room: systemic barriers. Powell's uphill battle was made 10 times steeper by the deep-seated colorism and discrimination that has been baked into Hollywood's DNA since day one. It didn't matter that the man had serious acting chops and a resume a mile long. He kept running into closed doors, rejected not because he couldn't deliver the lines, but simply because of the melanin in his skin. He has kept it 100 about the times execs waved him off, claiming he was too dark for the lead, or insinuating that his look was too intimidating for mainstream audiences, coded language for plain old racism. These were not isolated incidents. They forced Powell to go to war with an entire system. A system where Eurocentric beauty standards are still the law of the land, actively choking off opportunities for dark-skinned brothers in the game. Hollywood's obsession with marketability is often just a fancy way of saying they want a specific look, creating a tiny box for what they think audiences relate to, leaving a whole generation of wildly talented performers out in the cold just because they don't fit the cookie-cutter mold of a leading man. You have probably noticed that actors with darker complexions, like the legendary Clifton Powell, often get stuck in a very specific and frankly annoying Hollywood box. It is the same old story. They are constantly cast as the ruthless villain or the street-hardened thug, while executives completely ignore their ability to play soft, charming or complex leads. This isn't just a bad break for the actors. It is a persistent double standard that warps the way society views black men, keeping their on-screen representation dangerously one-note and restricted. When you actually look at the timeline of Powell's career, the contradictions are honestly mind-blowing and show just how confused the industry really is. Critics and fans praise him endlessly when he is being gritty and menacing, but the second a role calls for a romantic lead or genuine vulnerability, he gets pushed to the sidelines. This systemic mess forced him into a tiny corner of the industry, stifling his massive talent and robbing us, the audience, of seeing the full emotional depth he is actually capable of portraying. But let's be real, these casting choices aren't accidental. They are fueled by deep-seated prejudices that have been lurking behind the scenes for decades. These biases didn't just limit the opportunities Powell received. They shaped how the entire world perceived his artistry and defined his worth in the public eye. And sadly, these walls aren't just put up by studio executives. The toxicity spills over into how actors within the community perceive and support one another. Powell has never been one to bite his tongue, openly criticising the toxic habit in black entertainment circles, where artists attack or diminish each other instead of showing support. It is a heartbreaking dynamic that just adds more fuel to the fire in an industry that is already cutthroat competitive and looking for reasons to exclude you. There was that major heated moment where he publicly checked the iconic director Spike Lee for throwing unnecessary shade and harsh critiques at another black actor. Clifton's point was simple but powerful: tearing each other down only makes the systemic obstacles stronger, stopping the community from ever truly breaking through the barriers. The reason Powell goes so hard on demanding unity among artists is rooted in a deep personal belief he has held onto for years. He understands that systemic discrimination creates a scarcity mindset, tricking artists into thinking they have to compete against each other for the few scraps left at the table. In his eyes, respect and mutual support are non-negotiable because at the end of the day, the war for fair representation is a battle they all have to fight together. The industry machine is actively working against minority success, so if you don't have collective resilience and brotherhood, you are basically doomed to fail in this business. But he did have his shining moments, like the massive milestone of snagging an NAACP Image Award nomination for his incredible work in the movie Ray. To him, that wasn't just a trophy, it was a serious recognition of his ongoing value as an artist who fights tooth and nail against systemic discrimination. During the filming of Ray, people finally started to see him as more than just a character actor. He was recognised as a true leading force on set. He stepped into the shoes of Jeff Brown, the loyal and dedicated road manager for Ray Charles, and absolutely crushed the role with nuance and grace. That acknowledgement was a rare, beautiful glimpse of what happens when the system actually looks at talent without placing restrictions based on what someone looks like. But even with the awards and accolades, Powell knows the game is rigged, with discrimination morphing from obvious racism to sneaky hidden tactics that are harder to prove. Now, they use corporate buzzwords like market concerns and audience demographics to justify why they won't cast certain people in top roles. It is the perfect cover, allowing organisations to hide their established prejudices while pretending it is just about good business sense. These invisible barriers are arguably worse because they mask the truth, making it impossible to fix the casting process and keeping the cycle of discrimination spinning endlessly. Powell has spent his life fighting to be judged on his actual skills, not just slotting into the stereotypical roles he needed to take just to pay the bills. But the professional battlefield was only half the story. The challenges he faced in Hollywood were mirrored by personal hardships that tested his spirit even further. The guy has faced demons, personal struggles, and devastating losses that go way deeper than just not getting a movie part. Behind that intense, commanding screen presence lies a life that was moulded by early trauma and a constant fight for emotional survival. He grew up in southeast Washington, D.C. in a neighbourhood riddled with poverty and violence, where stability was a luxury he simply did not have as a child. Losing his mother when he was only 4 years old left a massive void, and living with an alcoholic father meant he had to learn how to survive in a fractured home. Powell is quick to give credit to the mentors and extended family who stepped in, providing the critical guidance that kept him from falling into the dangerous paths that claimed so many others. But let's be honest, a childhood that difficult casts a long shadow over your adult life, affecting every decision you make down the road. Desperate to break the cycle, Powell tried to build a fortress of safety for his own family, marrying Kimberly Powell and attempting to create the solid home life he never had. However, Hollywood is a beast that eats marriages for breakfast. The long hours, non-stop travel, and the seduction of fame put unbearable pressure on their relationship. In the end, the marriage imploded, leaving Powell not just emotionally devastated, but financially gutted in a way that took years to recover from. He has been brutally honest about the cost, admitting he lost a staggering $5 million in the divorce settlement, a crushing blow during a time he should have been stable. When he talks about his mistakes now, you can feel the deep regret and the painful self-awareness radiating off his words. He confessed that he was physically absent for his children, way too often chasing the bag, instead of being there for the important moments. It was a hard lesson learned too late, realising that writing cheques and providing financial support could never replace his actual presence and emotional connection. Looking back, he noted that being gone 50% of the time might be manageable, but being gone 70% of the time is overwhelming for any family. This admission paints a tragic picture of a man wrestling with the heavy sacrifices and the true cost of maintaining a demanding career in the spotlight. To cope with the stress, Powell developed a gambling addiction blowing anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 each year at the casinos. He tried to rationalise the expenses he incurred from his gambling activities, viewing it as a necessary escape, but it was ultimately a damaging vice. What started out as just enjoying the single life quickly spiralled into a financial nightmare that kicked into high gear right after his marriage fell apart. He painted a picture of a chaotic bachelor lifestyle filled with temporary flings, fair weather friends, and an endless drain on his bank account, all of which trapped him in a cycle that left him wide open for disaster. Looking back at Powell's life during that specific era, you can clearly see a hazardous pattern emerging, largely because he was chasing that instant gratification and temporary high, completely ignoring the long-term wreckage he was piling up for his future. On the surface, the man looked unstoppable, delivering powerhouse performances that were being devoured by fans all across the globe. But behind the velvet ropes and red carpets, his personal world was crumbling, rotting away from the inside out. The gap between the Hollywood star everyone saw and the struggling man he actually was became impossible to ignore, showcasing a fragile soul barely hanging onto the steering wheel as his life veered off the road. That massive disconnect between his public swagger and private hell finally reached a breaking point when those infamous allegations surfaced back in 2011. The wave of public judgment and media scrutiny couldn't have hit at a worse time striking right when Powell was already drowning in his own deep-seated personal demons. Trying to balance the audience's adoration with the nightmare unfolding behind closed doors just cranked up the pressure, leaving him feeling more isolated and stressed than ever before. Yet through all that tangled mess of drama, Powell's saga stands as a powerful example of grit and the brutal road to redemption, serving as a reminder that behind every scandalous headline sits a complicated human being who is just trying to survive the storm, figure out their legacy and learn the hard lessons life keeps throwing their way. The story of Clifton Powell isn't black and white. It is a messy, intricate web built from raw talent, sheer stubbornness, brutal hardships and plenty of controversy. Even though he faced some serious hurdles that threatened to permanently eclipse his entire acting career, his massive catalogue of roles stands tall as undeniable proof of his hustle and his dedication to the craft. We are talking about a guy with over 100 credits across movies and TV, so downplaying Powell's impact on the Hollywood landscape is simply not an option. Whether he is terrifying you in a gritty drama or making you bust a gut in a sharp comedy, he shows off a level of range that most actors can only dream of having. That professional legacy holds strong even if his messy personal life muddies the waters. And honestly, Powell's ordeal highlights a brutal truth about how the entertainment machine actually works. A reputation takes years to build and seconds to break, and the court of public opinion often swings a hammer way heavier than any legal judge ever could. Even though he was legally cleared and found innocent of wrongdoing, Powell still had to serve a different kind of sentence, one made of cancelled gigs, broken trust, and a stalled career. Those are the kinds of scars a simple case dismissal can't wipe away, proving that in this business an accusation can turn into a heavy backpack you carry forever, tainting your professional path and your private life long after the actual facts have been sorted out and the dust has settled. It forces us to ask some really uncomfortable questions about fairness and the incredibly high price of rush to judgment culture in Hollywood's unforgiving spotlight. On top of the scandal, Powell was dealing with deep-rooted systemic walls showing just how much colorism and old-school discrimination still dictate who gets the green light behind the scenes. He has been brutally honest about being told he was too dark for specific parts, exposing an ugly side of industry politics that runs way deeper than just simple casting preferences. These toxic biases didn't just put a ceiling on Powell's potential, they kept harmful stereotypes alive and kicked certain people out of the storytelling process entirely. In a way, his entire career acts as a magnifying glass that lets us really examine Hollywood's constant messy battle with true representation and the fight for actual equality on screen. But beyond the politics, the personal toll Powell paid reminds us that actors aren't just characters or clickbait headlines, they are real people, bleeding real blood. From growing up rough to watching his marriage implode and his bank account drain, Powell fought silent emotional wars that most of the public never caught a glimpse of. The fact that he owns his screw-ups, regrets and weak moments makes him human rather than just another scandal-plagued celebrity or a scary movie villain. Seeing the whole picture forces us to have a little empathy and challenges us to stop judging the book by its messy cover. You also have to respect Powell's refusal to entertain divisive attacks coming from within the black entertainment community itself, which shows he understands that solidarity is the only weapon that works when you are staring down systemic oppression. He pushed the conversation forward regarding how artists relate to one another, calling out the toxic behaviour, while championing strong partnerships in an industry known for eating its young. That kind of mindset adds serious weight to his legacy, proving he had leadership chops that went way beyond hitting his marks and memorising his lines. And we can't forget his NAACP Image Award nomination for the movie Ray, which stands as a glistening trophy acknowledging his insane skill level and impact. That nod wasn't just about one role. It was a major milestone that helped him hurdle the massive career roadblock set up by industry discrimination. It signalled a shift where the industry finally had to put some respect on his name, acknowledging that his talent and grind were undeniable. That accolade serves as a vital receipt confirming that he fought and survived every obstacle thrown his way during his professional journey. At the end of the day, Powell's saga proves we need to completely rethink how we measure a person's worth, especially when their fame gets tangled up in messy real-world controversies. It shines a spotlight on the collision between raw talent and personal demons and exposes how public perception and institutional systems still try to box minorities in. His case is a massive flashing sign warning us to use our critical thinking skills and dig for the truth, because making snap judgments is a dangerous game. Let us get real about the assumptions we make, because genuine growth and actual fairness are going to remain practically impossible in the entertainment world until everyone finally wakes up and acknowledges just how messy and complicated the business truly is behind the scenes. Just look at the rollercoaster ride of Clifton Powell, because his story is not just a lesson in pure talent and undeniable grit. It is a stark reminder of how heavy the burden of public scrutiny can get when the spotlight turns harsh. Everything he has been through, from the career peaks to the personal battles, shines a massive spotlight on the hard truths regarding equity and the deep-seated bias that still runs rampant through the veins of Hollywood. If you found this deep dive into the industry eye-opening, do us a favour and hit that like button, and make sure you are subscribed so we can keep bringing you these thoughtful exposés. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today.